Lost Some Ships.
Hey everybody, welcome back to We Lost Some Ships, episode 9? Or 10? I think this is episode 10.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to episode 10, we think.
Now we have the subtitle, Making Relationships Awesome Again.
That's
or
true.
Make Relationships Awesome Again.
Make relationships awesome again. Yeah. Although I feel like the whole make something great again is becoming overdone. But
I don't know what you're talking about, Paul.
yeah. But anyways, we need.
I came up with that myself.
When you search for relationships on some of these podcast app providers or whatever, it wasn't pulling us up.
Yeah, for some reason they didn't recognize the word "We Lost Some Ships."
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't get that. Come on. Clearly the AI is not smart enough yet.
Yeah, clearly it's about relationships.
Wait, have you been noticing these AI? I don't know if your phone does this, but now when somebody sends me a text, the AI, coupled with my phone, is like, "Here's 3 responses. Shall I send one?"
What? Oh, for Gmail.
Well, it's doing that for
your text.
Does it for my text now too?
My texts aren't smart. My phone's not smart enough.
Oh,
my Gmail is smart enough, and I'm impressed at how good it is at that.
Really?
Actually, yeah, how appropriate the pre-programmed responses are.
Yeah,
they're usually not very comprehensive, but
but
they could be a good, easy, thoughtless response.
I was gonna say, those the April Fool's jokes that Google does, and there was one where they were saying like, you can set it up to where we'll just send the response. You don't need to okay it. We'll just send it, and so they'll just like send responses to people, and it's like canned stuff that's just happening. You just hope it doesn't mess something up.
I'm glad that it's not automatic.
Anyways, okay, so last time we talked about fear.
Yeah, we did.
And since then, have you experienced any fear?
None at all whatsoever.
Oh, man. Okay, that episode
of course,
definitely worked.
That's right, it worked.
For you.
Yeah, no, I took a big exam. I studied. It was
true.
A week-long marathon study session for this exam, and towards the end, I was a little bit afraid that I was not even going to pass. So, I was thinking of canceling. And then I pushed through the fear,
considered
and
canceling,
it worked.
Huh?
Yeah.
I had fear when I took the bar for the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, I took the Arizona bar. I only took it once, all you people out there. Don't assume that I failed. No, but then I had to take the Utah bar because I moved up here before I had enough time under my belt. And I was much less fearful that time, having been through it once.
What about fear this past week, Paul?
Okay.
None?
Did I feel fear this past week? I've been feeling some fear and stress related to some work stuff, but yeah.
What's on the line?
Deadlines.
No, what is on the line?
Oh, what is on the line?
Why the fear?
Why the fear? Well, okay. One fear is just related to not wanting work to encroach upon the little amount of free personal time that I have.
Yeah.
I feel like that could drive me insane.
Yeah.
There's also some matters that I'm working on that are they're new types of things for me, so they cause me more stress because it's a little bit wading out into previously uncharted waters for me, and
with the potential for embarrassment or
to some
bad
extent,
client reviews
or out not necessarily bad client review probably, but I have a lot of value in having a good outcome for my client. That brings me like a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And so if I feel like it takes me a while to get up to speed on something, or if I'm a little bit uncertain about stuff, that can cause me some stress and fear.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Before this, we were also talking to one of our friends who was expressing his fear about getting back into dating after a long time out of it, because of anyway.
Yeah, and his divorce is coming out.
Too. So fear takes all sorts of forms, and
yeah, it does. The great preserver and the great destroyer.
Whoa!
Yeah, it's both.
That's right.
Any other announcements? I don't know if anything else.
So I think I mentioned how my crown fell off.
Oh, yeah.
So the world needs to know.
And are you going to talk about how you just put it back on?
I just put it back on. I got some dental cement at the store, and I put it back on, and
yep.
It feels a little bit high, like my teeth are rubbing against each other in ways that they didn't used to before. But otherwise, it's back on.
You remember those like Time Life books that were like how to do all kinds of stuff, or something like that? Because I remember this Far Side cartoon, and the guy was doing gallbladder surgery on his wife, he had this book. It was like the Time Life Book of Home Surgery or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. I mean, I'll need to go to a dentist to. Well, we'll see. If it stays, then I'll say, job done.
Are they gonna give you a stern look and/or talking to about like, hey, who put this crown back on?
This stinks. I don't care.
I
I don't care if they do or do not. I mean, they work for me.
Just tell them you got it done at some shady dental office in a dark
Actually,
corner.
Is it okay for dentists and dental assistants to go to like shame you for your? I mean, it kind of is, right? It's kind of their job.
For
like if you're like, oh, you need to floss more, or like, like shaming you. Like, oh, sure. You should have taken better care of your teeth.
Doctors do a little bit of that. Sometimes I'm trying to remember where I was listening to somebody was talking about how his doctor would say like, hey man, what do you want to like get diabetes when you're 60 or when you're 50? Like, come on, you need to get in better shape.
Yeah.
And we do need some of that. I don't know. Though when I was a child, I went to the doctor and Dr. Naj, I don't know this guy. I think he was from Germany. And he was like checking my heart pressure or something. I don't know how old I was. I was pretty young. And he was like, you're fat. Why don't you exercise? Why don't you exercise?
Well, that's also that classic German
it is.
Tactlessness.
Well, and it's also true that in some foreign countries, like, it's not socially unkind to say that. Like in Latin, in Spanish cultures too, you just call somebody fatty or like gordo.
Right. And that's a form of endearment, right?
Yeah, it's not like a big deal.
In China, in Chinese culture, my mom is Chinese. They think that that's their way of like showing love is to like tell you what you're doing wrong.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. So thank you for your love.
Yeah, like
thank you for the advice.
Like they're just trying to help you, like.
Okay, they're just doing what they can. Well, yeah, it's true. Like I like listening to some reggae too, and like I remember this one song, and the guy was like, in Jamaican culture, like it's a compliment to call a girl a fat girl. It's basically like she's super attractive.
Sure.
And so the guy's like talking about riding his bike, and he sees a fat
in different
girl,
cultures, like,
and he falls off because he's like so blown away by her beauty. And he's like, that's what the lyrics are.
Yeah,
like,
well, and I mean, in the U.S., like, our conception of beauty is, well, I mean, it's changed over the decades, but nowadays it's like stick figure skinny, right? But that's not true across cultures.
Yeah, I had seen some study where.
Sorry, when we're talking about women, at least. Probably for men too.
Sure, about women. It's true.
Men too. We want them fit and not fat.
I know. I was dating some girl, and
although most Americans are the opposite, not fit, fat and not fit. Anyway, go on.
True, man. Well, I do think that affects our dating lives in general. As cultures, as we get fatter, well, we're just less attractive to one another. But guys and girls, but I don't know. I was dating some girl, and she was like, and we were talking about what she liked in a guy, and she was like, I like real skinny guys, and I was like, at the time that wasn't me. I was like, okay. I was like,
what about very average guys with great personalities?
A little bit awkward.
And she said, no, I want skinny and bad personality.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
But I heard
that's all girls want. Someone with a bad personality.
Pretty much. That was like their dream. And but I did watch this thing about this study where females would pick Barbie dolls. It was like, I don't remember how old these girls were. They were younger, and they were like, pick the Barbie doll size that you think guys would most like. And they had them ranging from like very skinny to a little bit heavier. And girls on average picked the Barbie doll that was skinnier than what guys actually liked. So in their mind, it was like, I would need to get down to that level. Yeah. And it wasn't, that wasn't actually true. Yeah. All right, anyways, we're way off topic.
Way off.
Maybe we should get
for good cause.
On topic. That was for good cause. Today, we're actually going to be talking about personality type stuff, specifically Myers Briggs. So, yeah.
Also known as the Myers Briggs Type Indicator.
Yeah, MBTI.
MBTI.
Yep. And so, anyways, Bryce and I have delved into this a little bit, each independently of one another, and find it somewhat useful. But anyways,
it's useful.
Bryce has got a little bit of background info.
That's true. That's true.
Get us started a little.
First and foremost, so again, one of the things I've studied and all that education I spent so much time and money on. So I studied psychology, among other things. and personality is one of I found it to be one of the more interesting areas of study. But the whole idea of personality, because often I find when I talk about personality theories to people that some people are extremely resistant right off the bat because they're like, no, you can't label me. Yeah. And on the one hand, it's like, yeah, you're right. People are complex, and they are. And I think a good theory, like a good personality theory, accounts for that to some extent. On the other hand, the whole idea of personality theory go ahead.
Well, what do you mean? Like how a good personality theory accounts for that specifically?
They at least mention
the people that don't like this test are probably this personality type.
That's not what I mean.
Okay.
I'll explain. A little bit. But I lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. Well, the whole idea of personality, right, is that it's some stable core traits or a pattern that's exhibited, and everyone has those.
Sure.
Not perfect, not that they behave exactly the same way in every situation at all times, but But if a person says I don't believe in personality, repeatable. They're basically saying that people act completely randomly every time, which is not true. People are pretty predictable in some ways.
Sure. And the aversion that some people have to these things, maybe they feel like we're getting too close to robots. Like I am not an automaton.
Sure. I also think people want to be understood on an organic level and not just like, a person they just met says, "Oh, you're an ENFJ." Now I know everything about you. No one wants to be treated that way.
That
right?
is true. Yeah. And it's also true that there are some personality types that especially like personality tests.
That's true.
We are two of those. Yeah. In that we really like self-discovery and exploring our own personality and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, that was some bonus.
Maybe we're just conceited.
Yeah, some bonus explanation. Okay, so here's what Wikipedia says about Myers Briggs. So it was created by Catherine Cook Briggs and her daughter Isabel Briggs Myers. So it was a mother and daughter team. It's based on a lot of concepts in Jungian psychology, which is to say,
Carl Jung, Swiss psychoanalyst.
Yeah, he was great. Okay, so they'd speculated that humans experience the world using 4 principal psychological functions: sensation, intuition, feeling, and thinking, and that one of these 4 functions is dominant for a person most of the time. The MBTI was constructed for normal populations and emphasizes the value of naturally occurring differences. The underlying assumption of the MBTI is that we all have specific preferences in the way we construe our experiences, and these preferences underlie our interests, needs, values, and motivation.
Right. That part only talks about like the first or the middle 2 letters. But I think that.
Well, those are the 4 principal psychological functions.
Okay, then where's the extroversion and the introversion?
Those are...
It's just other stuff.
It's like what we do with those functions. So the middle 2 are the functions. And anyway. We'll explain all of this in due time, people.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Yes.
But it's slightly left. Yeah, so when you're talking about like people don't want to be classified kind of thing, they don't want to be like put in a box. But one point I will make about the Myers Briggs,
which is completely reasonable, I think.
Yeah, sure.
On the face of it,
sure. It is like
it's when they think that they have no box that they could be put in that I question their awareness. Sorry, go on.
That's true. Have you ever played this game, 1,000 Blank White Cards?
You told me about it. I can't remember.
I did. It's kind of like you take like an index cards, and there's kind of like no rules. You're in a group and you're like making up cards kind of as you go along. There's not really any strategy, but it pulls a lot of creativity out of people.
Oh, nice.
So it's kind of like yeah, I know it's a little bit. It does. I don't have the aversion to it like I do to Flux, but anyway,
Flux is the worst.
Yeah, it is. I hate Flux.
It's not a game.
But I had a roommate who really didn't like Myers Briggs, and we happened to be playing 1,000 Blank White Cards, and I made a card that was very clearly him, and it had his type on there, and it was like, I'm gonna go to my room, recharge my batteries by myself, read something like fantasy fiction, and think about my feelings, and then go someplace on time, because I'm an INFJ, and or something like that. And he took that pretty well, but he was really tired of us talking about Myers Briggs. I feel like we talked about too much.
But that resonated with him.
Oh, but the point I was gonna make though is that the Myers Briggs stuff really is supposedly only it doesn't necessarily speak directly to like this is your strength and this is your weakness.
Yeah, it's not about strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, it's
about preferences.
Preferences. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yeah, and there's no good or bad either. Like,
right.
These are all different. Well, it's different preferences. Like, and they're all useful. We all use them, but some of them we prefer over others.
There was this thread I was reading that was talking about some people were trying to figure out, did Jesus have a Myers Briggs personality type?
Oh, let's not go there.
No, you can do this with like every person.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah. Well, okay. Paul and I have had discussions about God's Myers Briggs type, and we disagree on it.
Oh, we do.
And Jesus is too. But that being said, yeah, it is fun to like psychoanalyze people across time and space, like people who are dead. That's interesting. But
which is what a lot of this is. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah. That's a good point. We disagree about that. Like, that's a good point. Because my thought was like, well, anybody can have a preference, even if you're perfectly good at both sides of either of the things.
Yeah,
you can still have a preference that this is the one I prefer.
It's off topic, but in my opinion,
well, it's not really off topic, but it's quasi.
Yeah.
All right. We'll skip it.
Let's stick to this mortal world. Although I'm of the opinion that in the grand beyond, in the great eternities, I think personality is more of a mortal adaptation. That's my point of view. Anyway, we're way off topic.
Well, what do you mean?
Paul, let's not go there. We've talked about this.
Okay, I forgot.
No, are we ever going to... Wait, I forget. Right, Did we even say that we're talking about introversion and extroversion this time?
No.
Then maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should just keep talking about the big picture stuff.
Well, sir, okay, so we can talk about some generalities So Myers Briggs bundles people by preference basically into 16 different personality types. It's a 4-letter code. So the first letter is extroversion versus introversion, E versus I. The second is intuiting versus sensing. The third is thinking versus feeling, and the fourth is judging versus perceiving. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of that to some extent.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there's this work by this guy named David Keirsey who bundled the 16 types further into 4 groups called temperaments, which is kind of like it bundles you according to like your strongest drive, whether you have like a drive for knowledge, a drive for ideals, a drive for SJ, which is duty, or a drive for action. So sometimes when I have people like take these tests online or whatever, and they're having a hard time deciding between 2 of the letters, sometimes asking questions about that drive will clarify things, because each of the 4 temperaments is related to 2 of the letters. So if you have NF, you're an idealist. Bryce and I are both idealists. Bryce is maybe closer to the...
No, I mean, I am, but...
Sure, you're closer to the NT line than me.
You go ahead and finish your thought.
Sure, which is like a knowledge seeker. Anyways, these different drives, they speak to how you act in certain situations sometimes, or your preferences as well. Anyways, we should talk about the letters.
So I think, I mean, you go on Facebook or online, and there's bazillions of different... well, it used to be the big thing, like, which Harry Potter...
Yeah.
Or which, your Myers Briggs will predict which Star Wars character you are, or which Harry Potter character. Right. I'm glad those are no longer hot on Facebook. But
whatchamacallit, Analytica would steal all your data, and your friends would be like, now we've got them.
The perfect crime.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called, something Analytica.
I can't remember. Anyway, something Analytica. Cambridge Analytica.
Sell it to the Russians.
Yeah. Okay. So there's all sorts of different types, right? And they're all like copies of the original. So the rights to the original MBTI is actually owned by a company called CPP. Can't remember what that stands for. But they actually have the official stuff. So when I did some coach training a few years back, one of the most valuable parts of that was that I took an advanced form of this, of the Myers-Briggs assessment. And by the way, they call them, like, practitioners call them assessments, not tests, because a test implies that you can pass or fail, or that there's a right and a wrong. I mean, just for the sake of accuracy,
But just for fun, I feel like one of the assessors should at the end of somebody's assessment say, "You failed." Walk out, or
Yeah, good idea.
Actually, bad idea. But a fun idea.
Anyway.
Okay, so you took one of these though.
Oh yeah,
it
was a more advanced version, and it. Okay, so I would say two things. One, like the best versions are the ones that like break down each letter by a percentage preference.
Okay.
To show how strong your preference is, because there's definitely people who are more extreme and people who are not.
Well, and that's one of the main criticisms that I think that the MBTI gets is that it's so binary. If you don't have that. That it doesn't give you as much useful information.
Yeah, and I feel like if people took this more advanced version, which is not free, unfortunately, but also, you get what you pay for. But anyway, if more people took it, they'd be like, oh, okay, I can take Myers Briggs more seriously now because I see that it does account for the nuance.
Sure.
Another thing I really liked about it was that it breaks each letter down into 5 subscales. Kind of like.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, you should. I need my copy. I need to get back from a friend, but and then I'll show you.
Okay.
But and so I can't talk too knowledgeably about it until I get that back. But it has like subscales that like for instance, like with extroversion, versus introversion, the subscales were like preference for intimacy versus preference for broad association, where broad association is more of an extroverted, and then intimacy is more of an introverted, or like initiation, like initiating versus like passive. Like passive is more introvert, versus initiating is more extrovert. So it breaks it down. So for all you Myers Briggs haters and skeptics out there, maybe you should take this version.
Yeah, maybe take the real version.
Yeah.
Sure. And then we should talk a little bit more about why Myers Briggs tends to get knocked. By the professional community a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's methodologically it's not the most airtight, but nothing is in social sciences. A common criticism is there's a validity issue where the actual measurement instrument, the survey, does not really measure what it's purporting to measure. So it's purporting to measure preference for, sensory information versus intuitive information, for instance, which we'll explain that in a later episode. But it purports to do that through asking questions which aren't necessarily asking that anyway.
Yeah,
I don't want to get too much in the weeds. But.
Sure, no. Like, I gave a presentation on... I had this Myers Briggs book. It was called What Type Am I? By Renee Barron. And I used some of that stuff to give a presentation to some people. And then we, all took the test. But it was basically, almost everybody in there tested as an N on the second letter.
That doesn't surprise me.
And, it was interesting. I was kind of like, is this because the N's were just more interested in this? And
there's a lot to that.
Yeah. So, or was it that we were talking about ends in a more cool, hip way?
That's probably that too.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, well that's another common criticism is it's related to that validity issue. So it's a self-reported assessment, meaning all they have to go on is what a person says about themselves, and we don't always see ourselves. Well, we don't see ourselves completely accurately. No one does. And so depending on how self-aware we are, how we're feeling that day, those can impact. Or if maybe we had a fight with someone that day, and anyway.
Well, and it's also true that, but when you. Especially the first time or two when a person takes these tests, some of these questions you've never even thought about them before,
right?
And so it's very common. I know when I've asked people some of the questions that are on the test, they'll often be like torn on every single person. They'll be like, oh man, I don't even like. I feel like I'm both of those, and I feel like some of that is like we're not always like self-analyzing ourselves to be able but once you've kind of gone through some of these a few times, because for me I tested differently the first few times, and after a while it all normalized, and now I basically I'm assessed the same way every time. It generally gives me the same type, but but that's one of the criticisms it has, is that it doesn't have high repeatability, that people take it the first time, take it a second time, they'll get different results. But I feel like
retest.
That's partly related to
reliability.
Yeah. Of course, you were talking earlier about how, like, well, if you weren't self-reporting, maybe somebody who's, kind of a professional at assessing you might do a better, more accurate job.
So another assessment I took, for that coaching training was like a leadership assessment. And it was a 360 assessment, meaning you get multiple people's data, on the same person.
Yeah.
I think those are valuable. Now, that being said, assessing someone's leadership qualities, I think, is different from assessing someone else's preference for, for how they make decisions, right? Outside people can't really see that. They can make some inferences based on what they've observed, inferences or, an inference is something that is so... I'm not sure inference is the right word, because that entails that there's so much evidence that it has to be that, right? Anyway, sorry, I'm getting
Are you
nitpicky.
Inferring something? Yeah.
Either way, yeah.
But I think like maybe one of the experiences, at least that I've had with the Myers Briggs, is although it kind of gets knocked like that, I feel like it has been useful in my relationships with other people.
Too.
Roommates,
absolutely.
Co-workers,
totally.
People that I've dated.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's been some accuracies. Like, for example, the personality types that they say I probably would most naturally match up with in a romantic setting. I feel like there has been some accuracy to that. And I don't think that that's just me projecting onto what they're saying. And,
sure.
One of my roommates...
For the record, Paul has tried to convince me that... I'm not convinced about the...
He's not convinced about the...
I'm not convinced. Not yet.
Anyway. It's also true that Isabel Myers Briggs Myers or whatever, she actually she was married when she came up with this thing, and she said later, like, I guess if I had known of this stuff, maybe I wouldn't have married my husband, because he was like not a very good match for me personality-wise. But they made do with, it's not like they're, you're doomed if you don't find...
Exactly. You're not doomed. You're not doomed. This is like a compatibility thing. And
and this is kind of on the edges of kind of stuff. It's like, well, if you were a pioneer crossing the plains or fleeing from, I don't know, some country that's fallen apart and an oppressive king or whatever, you're probably not like asking everybody, okay, wait, now I need to test your personality type first to see if we're compatible. Like you're talking about in an earlier episode. Sure. You might just be like, are you going to not kill me or abandon me?
Right.
Or drink alcohol to our ruin? Or...
Oh, well, we're getting back to cultural expectations.
Yeah,
and how they're a lot lower in other countries.
But when I was preparing...
Which my plan B for getting a singing this...
Russia? Or?
Yes.
Russia.
Asian women.
Russian bride.
Russian women. It's my plan B.
Well, Asian women are at least shorter. I had actually looked this up on Wikipedia. The average height of a woman is slightly taller than I am in the United States.
Yeah.
And in Australia, even taller, and in Russia, pretty tall.
Oh,
but if I go to Asia or Latin America, I'm golden.
Yes.
So,
perfecto.
But instead, I just don't think about it. But,
okay, so if we rewound 3 minutes, there was something you were saying that I interrupted you, and then you interrupted me interrupting you.
Well, one of the things,
you were making some sort of point.
I was making some point.
Sorry.
I know one of the points that I was about to make was that when I was preparing for that presentation I was doing about the Myers Briggs thing, and so I was reading that book that I just gave, What Type Am I by Renee Barron. It has a bunch of cartoons in there too, which is fun. And anyways, one of my roommates at the time, I would get in all these debates with him like all the time, and to me I was always like, man, why is this guy like debating with me all the time? It's like, why doesn't he just leave me alone?
Yeah.
And then I was reading the thing about his accuracy temperament, which is the NT combination of letters. And it was like, it had a cartoon of two guys arguing, and then at the end shaking hands and saying, "That was real great. Let's do this next week." And it was like, they just really love to debate for debate's sake. It's just their personality type. And an NF, there was a cartoon of an NF and an NT saying like, "Now don't take this personally, but," and the NF was like running away. And because
of course they took it personally.
Right. The description was that an NT, or knowledge seeker, appreciates accuracy more than harmony. And an NF is the opposite, generally appreciates harmony more than accuracy. So it was my tendency, for example, when somebody would say something that I knew was totally incorrect, I often would be like, "Huh, that's interesting," and in my mind make a mental note, "Wrong." But I wouldn't.
Or like, "Why is this person so mean to me? Why do they hate me?"
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't say it out loud. But the point, to come full circle there, the point of that was that I was preparing for that thing. I had read that thing about NTs, and I felt like that very positively impacted my friendship with that specific roommate.
Because you were able to not judge them so harshly.
Yeah. And then when that would happen, I would be more objective about it. Yeah. I felt like I had a similar experience with one of my bosses at one of my workplaces and a secretary that I worked with. Yeah. And I felt like it was easier for me to then at some point, sometimes later, say, "I'm not. It's not that I don't want to talk about this. I'm just taking this personally, unfortunately, and I don't mean to." And it would help us to not have conflict. Yeah. So it was great. Anyways. Yeah. Well, so it was a good experience. Yeah. I know that's anecdotal. That's
exactly why I think Myers Briggs is useful, or good personality theories are useful.
Yeah. And another thing I think that makes it useful is that it's one of the few that's relatively easily understandable by like the layperson. Like,
yes. Now I would say another personality theory I like a lot is the color code, the Hartman color code. Okay. That one's, I would say, even more.
Is that the red, white, blue, yellow?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That one's even more intuitively appealing and easy to understand. I find that I like Myers Briggs more now, just because it fills in more of the details. But yeah, if we're talking like easy to grasp, I think color code works well. And color code, if you think Myers Briggs has had some knockoffs, color code has had like 10,000 times more knockoffs. I know. Again, probably stemming from the fact that it's easier to grasp colors, right? That's, when we think of
it's more visually
a red
appealing.
Person, of course we think of like fire and
that's true.
A loud color, and anyway.
Yeah, and there's not total overlap between these either. Like, I'm an ENFP. I don't have much red in me at all.
Yeah.
And one of my good friends is an ENFP as well, but she has a lot of red.
Interesting.
My brother took one of these at his workplace. It was a color code, but it was not that one. But it was kind of like...
It was some knockoff, probably.
It was some knockoff, but it would show like... it was supposed to... Like, if it was perfect, it was a square. But however more strong you were on one of the tendencies, it would pull the square in that direction. So it was like some kind of a polygon. I don't know what, a four-sided polygon. But my brother's was a perfect square.
Wow!
And
he's attained nirvana.
Yeah, I don't know. It was... interesting. He did great in that career. He's still in it.
Oh, excellent.
It's like VP of engineering. He's like, he was doing, I don't know. And I feel like his rounded personality and whatever it was related to his work really helped.
I didn't know you had a famous brother-in-law or brother?
Brother. He's not famous.
He's famous and successful. He's a VP of something.
He's a VP, man. VP of engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really cool. I do think he's really well-rounded in a lot of ways, but... Anyways, anything else we want to kind of wrap this one up? Maybe. So this is kind of a general overview of some of the Myers Briggs stuff.
I mean, we didn't give too much of an overview.
Not a lot.
I can give a little more details.
Do it.
Should I? Okay. So again, back to what Wikipedia said. Well, it talked about those 4 functions. Getting information from sensation, from our intuition, and making decisions based on our feelings and on our thinking. So those are kind of like the 4 main functions. But the first letter is extrovert or introvert. That refers to our general orientation to the world. And it has to do with what energizes us and what tends to drain energy. Okay. And then, So the second letter is sensing versus intuition. That's S versus N.
Some people say intuiting.
Oh, right. Yeah. That has to do with how we prefer to get information. Sensors prefer to get information from what can be observed from their senses. Whatever's
the real
tactile.
world. Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
There are 5 senses.
That's right, and I would describe it as more of a what you see is what you get approach to life.
Yeah.
Whereas for intuitors, they tend to recognize patterns. So another thing, sensors tend to notice the sequence of things. So they're more sequential in how they obtain information. If this happened, then that. I noticed that. For intuitors, it's more like they recognize the big picture.
Yeah.
They can connect the dots between different points of information, maybe on disparate things. They can read between the lines.
Yeah. See the big picture.
Yeah. So and then T versus F. That's thinking versus feeling. It's about how you prefer to make decisions. With thinking, that's about cold hard logic, what is reasonable, what follows logically, and not as much about what the outcomes might be, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Whereas for feelers, they're much more emotional. They care about how decisions match with their values, how other people are affected.
They tend to go by their gut, even if I'm an F, and so even if
I am for the most part as
make a pros and cons list, and I'll be like, well, this decision seems to make the most sense. But in the end, if I feel more comfortable with the other decision, I'll often do the other decision anyways.
Yeah. By the way, this is one of the I think the only of the 4 letters that actually is strongly correlated with gender.
Oh, really?
Not surprisingly. Women are much more strongly feelers.
F's and men are more often thinkers.
Yep. Which I don't think should be surprising.
But
it's interesting that what do they call it? Folk wisdom. No, what's the word? I need a nap.
Urban legend.
Conventional wisdom.
Okay,
it is interesting that conventional wisdom is backed up by this.
Okay.
Okay, and then the last of the 4 letters is judging versus perceiving. That is which of those 2 functions do we prefer? Sorry, the 2 categories of functions. So remember, S and N is sensing versus intuition. That's about getting information. F and T, that's feeling versus thinking. That's how we make decisions. So the last letter, J versus P, has to do with which of those 2 functions we prefer, making decisions or getting information.
Okay. That makes sense, yeah.
For judgers, they prefer to make decisions. For perceivers, they prefer to get information. So in practical terms, that means a judger is more likely to want to have a plan. To have things decided, to have a plan, and to stick with that plan. Yeah. They are often described as being planful.
I've heard that word before.
And can be kind of rigid about it too.
Sure.
If they feel a decision has been made, they don't want to second guess that. It's already been decided. For perceivers, they prefer to keep their options open so they can get as much information as they can. Any of these can be taken to an extreme, to a fault, but in an extreme form, perceiver would never make any decisions about anything in life, right?
No, I've heard it explained that it's like what stage of a decision you prefer to be in, and the perceiver prefers to be in the decision is not yet made stage of the decision, and the J tends to prefer decision is made stage of the decision. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's basically it. That's a good little overview.
Yeah.
So in the next few episodes, we'll get into the specific letters and kind of talk a little bit more about them and how they can or do affect our relationships with other people.
Yeah.
For good or real.
Oh.
So, yeah. All right.
Or for mediocre.
Or for mediocre. Or for neutral. Anyways. Yeah, someday when we get robots that are really highly advanced, we'll have to inject Myers Briggs personality type into them, so that they can be like
in a syringe.
That type of people that we want to hang out with. Like, hey, look.
Oh, I guess only if it's a cyborg or what? Android, whatever has part.
I'm gonna switch you over to an introvert, so you'll talk a little bit less, or something like that. Anyways, okay, well. I guess that's basically it.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all next time.
Take care. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app and give us a rating. Thank you.